TCU misses out on a potential transfer target, defensive lineman. There's some reason for concern, but I'll tell you why I don't think it's necessarily a huge deal for this upcoming year. Also, TCU baseball is on fire. That's all coming up next on Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's your team every day. I am your host, Steven Simcox. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Locked On Horned Frogs. Also, you can find us wherever it is you get your podcasts and it's audio variety. We're on the SiriusXM app now. So if that interests you, if that's a place where you'd like to check out the show, you can do so there. So I talked earlier this week about potential transfer portal targets who might be left there. And one guy that had a visit with TCU recently was Corey Roberson. He's a defensive lineman from Oklahoma, really good size, like, 6'4", almost 300 pounds, was a nose tackle there, backup nose tackle. Now, he did not play in 2022. For whatever reason, didn't really seem to mesh with Brett Venables and that staff, but was a contributor in 2020 and 2021 and seemed like somebody who could come in and be a nice depth piece for TCU. He ended up yesterday. He was originally actually committed to Arizona State. He was committed to Arizona State when he made the visit to TCU. I'm not sure if I mentioned that at the time, but I should have. And he also visited SMU, and he's decided to go to Dallas. He's going to play for the Mustangs next season, committed to SMU as of yesterday afternoon. So TCU misses out on him as a target. I mean, that specific recruitment, I'm not super bothered by it. Like, I think he would have been a nice piece, but it's the typical kind of player that you're going to get this late in the process, which I think is going to be more of a, backup role at the Power 5 level of TCU. Now at SMU, I feel like there's a good chance that he could be a day one starter. And that's probably what they tried to sell him on when they had him there on campus. I'm not sure if there was NIL money involved as well, but for whatever reason, he ends up at SMU. And so TCU seems pretty locked in with the defensive lineman they have. I think at this point, maybe you have a JUCO guy come in, but for the most part, they're done adding players through the portal. I know Joe, one of our listeners, was asking me about that. I feel like this was sort of the last domino to fall, was this Corey Roberson young man, because he, actually visited. It's at a position of need. And so this is your D-line now. And I have concerns about this defensive line because there's not a lot you can do if you're getting blown off the ball. There's things in football that you can sort of account for and scheme for, especially on the offensive side. Brian Smith, who is our recruiting insider now at the Locked On Network and does a lot of scouting, he was telling me yesterday, and if you want to check that episode out, it's up on our YouTube page, and the audio version as well is available. But he was telling me, offense, you can sort of do some creative things. You can scheme that up. You can find ways to isolate your playmakers in favorable situations, get them the ball. There's a lot of moving parts that you can make work to where even if you don't necessarily have the most explosive players in the world, you can still be a high-scoring offense. With defense, he says it's more about dudes. There's really no way around it. At a certain point, if you're going to contend at a high level, you just have to have guys that can get it done. And so with the defensive line especially, if you're getting blown off the ball, if you're not able to maintain gap integrity and get off blocks and not reestablish the line of scrimmage, get any sort of push, there's not a ton you can do about that. You can load people up in the box. You can try to bring people on blitzes, but that has its own risk. And we might see some more of that, especially with the experienced corners that Joe Gillespie has this year with Avery Helm and Josh Newton. But what we saw from JG last year was that was not a huge part of his arsenal, or at least not something that he wanted to do on a consistent basis. Now, the starting D-line, I like overall. I think, Dominic Williams, Caleb Fox, Timon Mitchell, maybe Paul Wale can get the job done. I just don't know about rotating guys in and out on a game-to-game basis. How's it going to work? And so that's my biggest concern for the team. Now, I will say, last season, as the year went on, I thought they got better. And Dylan Horton ended up being a big-time sack machine late in the season, but it wasn't an all-year thing. Especially early in the year, they really did struggle to get pressure. And with a 3-3-5, you're not necessarily asking those three down linemen to get consistent pressure all the time. But you have to find a way to make the quarterback uncomfortable, get him off the spot, moving around a little bit. And so we'll just have to see what that looks like with the guys that they have available, because I don't at this point think that they're going to go and reach for somebody else. And no offense to Corey, but the reason I say I'm not like, it's a blow from the perspective of you were clearly interested in this person. You didn't get them. I just don't think he was going to be an immediate impact starter. I feel like he would have been good for your depth. And if somebody got injured, it would have been nice to have him around. But it's not really affecting your front 3D linemen at the moment. So they lose out on that recruitment and regrouped now. We'll see what Sonny Dykes and company have in store, but I really think this is your roster now. And Tanner McKinney asked me yesterday, he basically asked me, like, what do you think the two deep roster is going to be? Starters and second string players for the season. And I'll have to take a rain check on that for now. That's a weekend project. I have a pretty good idea of some of the skill positions, but I'll have to look more closely at just the roster and spring camp notes and sort of where we're at. But I'll try to give a more robust and fuller answer about that, Tanner, on Monday or Tuesday's show. I feel pretty good about this team, though, going into the year. I mean, there's some holes. Like, I think Z-line is the biggest concern for me. I'm interested to see how they replace the wide receiver production that they lost, because the outside guys, I feel like there's some question marks there too. But I think they've done a nice job of sort of reloading here as much as they could through the portal in the first and second window. When we come back, TCU baseball. They are on fire right now. It's exciting to watch them play. So we'll discuss that next. I do want to mention Birddogs, though. Birddogs, they were nice enough to send me a few products of theirs, some shorts I've been wearing around the house. I've been wearing them out. Warmed my son's baseball game last night. And the reason I love Birddogs is because they're very comfortable. They fit well, and you can really wear them anywhere because they have that comfort. But they could pass for nicer attire. I mean, not like black tie affair, obviously, but they can pass for a more upscale event. They can pass for work if your workplace is a little more relaxed like mine, or just doing stuff around the house, doing yard work. They're water resistant. You can get some stuff on these, and it's not going to be a huge deal. And you can go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege and get a free tumbler with every purchase. So get that tumbler today. Birddogs, shorts, pants, great comfort, great feel. One of our new sponsors here on the Locked On Network, and we are happy to have them alongside us. So TCU baseball, they are 2-0 in the Big 12 tournament. Took down Kansas yesterday afternoon. That game also kind of went into the evening, and beat K-State at 9 a.m. on Wednesday. And so now they'll play the winner of the Kansas State game today, at 9 a.m. on Saturday. And if they can win one game, they'll move on to the Big 12 championship game. The winner of that Kansas K-State game would have to beat the Frogs twice to eliminate them. The other team on the other side of their bracket, Texas, well, they went 0-2 and bowed out pretty quickly, lost to Kansas in game one, and then fell to K-State in an elimination game on Thursday. So things looking good for the Frogs. Big news from yesterday's game, Braden Taylor hit another home run. He is now your all-time career home run leader at TCU, and did that in 3 years, which is super impressive. And Eric Hughes, one of my friends, he asked me this yesterday, and I thought it was a good question because I really hadn't thought much about it. But he said, where does Braden Taylor rank as best TCU players ever, like best TCU baseball players of all time? And I'll have to lean on my viewers and my listeners here. You can comment on YouTube You can also tweet at me. I'm at SimcockSteven on Twitter. The show is at Locked On TCU. Because I really started following TCU baseball closely in 2012. That was when I got there as a student, started going to Lupton on a regular basis, really got into college baseball. I was a casual observer before then. And so a lot of that first College World Series team, I believe it was in 2010, I wasn't really up on who all the main characters were there. I know Royce Huffman had that record before. Braden Taylor broke it. Didn't get to see him play either. There are a number of guys that came through the program that I just don't have a great memory rank for. But as far as guys that I have watched, it's really hard to think of anybody who's a more complete player than Braden. I mean, Evan Scoug and Cody Jones were the first two names that came to my mind. Jones wasn't a power hitter, but he was a great leadoff hitter and outstanding center fielder. Scoug was cleanup guy, could hit home runs, had huge hits in his career, was also a great defensive catcher. Had that big blast against Missouri State in the Super Regionals to make sure they won game one, and then they went on to sweep that Super Regional and make the College World Series. Luken Baker was another person that came to my mind. And it's kind of hard to rank Luken because he was a DH for a lot of his career because of injuries. And when he got to TCU, he was also a pitcher, and he was really good until they shut him down because of an arm injury. But Luken had so many huge hits in his career. Had that massive home run against Texas Tech in the College World Series, game winner to give TCU the win there. And then there's pitchers as well, even though it feels like those guys should almost be in their own category. But Preston Morrison was just outstanding. He would just frustrate people with that 88-mile-per-hour fastball. He was incredible. Trey Teakle was the guy that popped in my head because he was so good out of the pen as kind of a middle innings reliever. Brandon Finnegan was fantastic and then went on to pitch in the World Series with the Royals that same season that he pitched in the College World Series for TCU. But I'd love to know, where does Braden Taylor rank as far as all-time TCU players for you? And who's your number one if it's not Braden? Give me those rankings on YouTube in the comments, or you can tweet at me. I'm at SimcockSteven on Twitter. The show is at Locked On TCU. As far as TCU baseball, though, another run rule win yesterday. They win 14-4. They scored 30 runs in 2 games, scored 16 on K-State. Everybody's hitting the ball. Carson Bowen, Elijah Nunez, they're both on fire. Curtis Byrne is having a really good week. They're doing it all. Now, I will say, I'm not necessarily worried about this because you play the people in front of you. It feels like they haven't seen decent pitching in about 3 weeks. I know Cal State Fullerton came into Lupton and they have a good staff. Baylor was, the worst team in the Big 12. Went on the road to Manhattan, and K-State's a good team. Took 2 out of 3 from them. K-State doesn't have the deepest pitching staff in the world. KU saw their number 2 guy yesterday. It's not working. Cole Klecker, not his best outing, but he sort of battled through it. Luis Rodriguez is not pitching this week. He has a shoulder issue. And Kendall Rogers said he thought that he would be back for the regionals. I assume we'll see Steven Stoutenborough tomorrow morning as the guy that gives them a chance to get in the championship game. I don't know who will pitch on Sunday. Maybe Chase Hoover. He pitched a little bit yesterday. Maybe Braden Sloan. Those are kind of the options that come to mind. Cam Brown got the start on Wednesday and battled through 3 innings. Only ended up giving up 2 runs, but walked a lot of guys. Pitch count got way up there. I mean, I wonder, Cam did really good in relief in that K-State series. And go back to last year, there were a few moments where he came in the game. I remember that Florida State series, he came in after Riley Cornelio got touched up pretty good and sort of settled things and calmed the waters. I just wonder if there's a role for him as a middle innings guy. I know you need to have 4 or 5 starters in a regional situation, but it seems so difficult for him for whatever reason to stay mentally sharp and just focus and consistently pitch well when he's on the mound, from the start in the first inning. And so I don't know if Kirk Saarloos would consider using an opener when he wants to use Cam for most of the game, but he did what he had to do in that game on Wednesday. There's no way they're going to host a regional. I think they could get up to a 2 seed. Kendall Rogers said he felt like their ceiling was a 2 seed. I should have looked at the latest projections. I didn't look today. But really at this point, if you win a Big 12 tournament title, that's awesome. It helps feed into your momentum. And then you just kind of wait to see where you're going to have to go. You're going to have to go somewhere on the road, and you hope that it's a workable regional, that you don't have to that you don't get sent to like Baton Rouge to play LSU or Winston-Salem to play Wake Forest, but that you end up somewhere where you think you can knock off the host and give yourself a chance to move on to the Supers. And so we'll follow that closely. But TCU baseball playing really, really well right now. I like what they're doing as a team. They've turned this thing around. I mean, they were out of the picture a few weeks ago, and they are now firmly in the NCAA tournament, which is pretty crazy to think about because I would not have guessed that coming off that, brutal series to Texas where they lost 2 out of 3. We'll come back and wrap things up. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. So my plan for now is to have an episode out on Monday. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I know Monday's Memorial Day. Thank you to all our vets, obviously. And then we can't say thank you enough to those and the family of those who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. I will plan to have some content up, though, on Monday for your holiday weekend. Hope everybody has a great holiday weekend. Hope you stay safe. I hope you have a good time with family, remembering those who served and who paid the price and made the ultimate sacrifice for us. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. Thank you for listening or watching. It's your team every day.